Right. Yeah, so now it's working. And let's share the screen. Okay. Yes. So do you see lecture 6, SI 425 written on the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
excellent, excellent. All right. Okay. All right. Very nice. So last time we ended our time by talking about the following thing. Yeah. So let's just recall a little bit before we move on. So this was last time. Yeah. What did we do? The last thing that we did was we showed that no matter what two real numbers you give me, there is always a rational number between them. That was one. And the another thing, that was the first theorem of, I think, this course, was the following. Yeah, let's just quickly recall the statement that there exists a positive real number x satisfying x square equals 2. Yeah, so there is indeed a real number whose square is the real number 2. Yeah, and how did we do that? So just quickly recall the idea of the proof. Uh, how did we do this? What we did that, we considered a certain set. We called it, or we considered all the real numbers which are at least as big as 0 and whose square is strictly less than 2. Yeah, we showed that this is non-empty, bounded above. Hence, by the completeness property of R, this set has a supremum in R. So we showed that the supremum of S exists in R. Sorry, I'm just very sloppy here. The supremum of S exists in R. And so let's denote this by something. I think we called it alpha. Let's call it alpha. Then we were able to show that alpha square equals 2. Right? This is what we did last time. Correct? Everybody with me on this point? Up till this point? Is that a yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? Okay. So here's a certain remark that I would like to make. There's a remark. All right. So in the proof of the above theorem, replace, so instead of considering S by the following set T. Yeah, so how am I going to define T? So I am now going to look at all rational numbers such that x is positive and x square is strictly less than 2. Right? So instead of looking at all real numbers satisfying these two inequalities, I am now going to look at sort of focus my attention on only the set of rational numbers. Right? And you sort of run through the same argument. Yeah, you say that T is non-empty, T is bounded above. The completeness property of R says the supremum of T exists in R. Right? So replace N and sort of, I would, instead of writing all of that again, I will just say that conclude by similar arguments that so let me call it Y equal to supremum of T exists in R. correct? And top of it, it satisfies, it exists and it satisfies y square equals 2. Is that okay? Is that okay? Do I take this silence as a yes with everybody? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so at this point, please recall that we all agreed that there is no rational number y whose square is 2. Yeah, so let me just make this remark here. But there is no rational number whose square is 2. Correct? So that means that the y, the supremum of t, cannot be a rational number, right? It does not belong to the set of rational numbers. Yeah. So what am I trying to say here? See, look here. Here I have a subset T of the set of rational numbers. T is bounded above, T is non-empty, but the supremum of T does not belong to Q. Yeah. So let me note, sort of highlight this point here. So here we have a concrete example. We have T subset of Q. Yeah, so I have a subset of Q. T is non-empty. Clearly, T is bounded above, right? And the supremum of T exists, but does not belong to the set of rational numbers. Supremum of T exists, but supremum of T does not lie in the set of rational numbers. Is that okay? Yes? Is that okay? Everybody
Yes,
sees this? Yes?
Yes,
Now,
ma'am.
this is saying that
Yes,
the
ma'am.
ordered field of rational numbers is not complete. Conclusion, hence, the ordered field Q is not complete. Yeah, there's a not here. Right? So Q, the field Q, yeah. So the set of rational numbers has the algebraic properties. The set of rational number also has the order properties, but it fails to exhibit the completeness property, which is so very crucial to the set of real numbers R. Is that okay? Everybody with me up till this point?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? Excellent. Yeah. So this is what I wanted to say about this. So shall I take it as a yes with everybody present here?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
All
ma'am.
right.
Yes,
Excellent. 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 Okay. So let's move on to the next topic that I would like to talk about is the extended real number system. Yeah. Just take a small note of that. The extended real number system. All right. So what does it consist of? The let me write that down. The extended real number system consists of, so what does it consist of? R, yeah, we said R of real numbers. So it consists of R and two symbols, yeah. So I'm just going to use two symbols, yeah. So what is the symbol? I'm going to make sense out of it now. As of moment, they are just notation, right? So what do we do? How do we define what is the meaning of these two symbols? So we preserve the order in R. Yeah, so there is a notion of order in R, right? Courtesy the order properties that we discussed. So we preserve the original order in R, and here is the definition of these two symbols. We define that for every real number x, I'm going to define this as this. Yeah, this is the meaning of these two symbols. Yeah. X is bigger than this symbol and less than this. Yeah, so in nomenclature, this is called as the positive infinity and the negative infinity, respectively. Okay, so with this, this is the definition. Yeah, nothing more to it. Okay. So with this definition in mind, we say that if you have a non-empty subset of real numbers which is not bounded above in the set R, yeah, not bounded above in the real number system, then we assign the symbol on the right as its supremum. Yeah, so I'll just write that down. So this is more of a convention. I'll write this down here. If S is a non-empty, I have a non-empty set of real numbers which is not bounded above. Right? So bounded above where? Bounded above, not bounded above in the set of real numbers. Yeah, so it has no upper bound in the set of real numbers. Then by convention, the supremum of E himself, the supremum of S is defined to be this symbol that we introduced right above. Yeah. So this is in the extended real number system. Right? So if somebody asks you what is the supremum of S in the real number system, you would say it does not exist. But if the supremum of S in the extended real number system is the symbol positive infinite. Is that okay? Yeah, similar statement you can make is this. If S is a non-empty set of real numbers which is not bounded below in R, then the infimum of S is defined to be, is said to be by convention negative infinity in the extended real number system. Is that okay? Yeah, these are conventions.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And some more conventions before we make any other progress. So again, these are conventions. So if X is real, X belongs to the set of real numbers, then this is said to be this. X minus this is said to be this, and X by positive infinity is said to be 0, and so is X divided by negative infinity. Yeah? So things like that, right? Something that you have already familiar with, but this is something. So you can make sense out of the supremum in the extended real number system for a subset of R which is not bounded above. Yeah? Is that okay? Yeah, questions? Yeah.
Ma'am, if a set does not have a supremum in the real number system and it has a supremum in the extended real system, which is positive infinity, suppose, then how is it useful for us?
See, all of this is abstract mathematics. I am just saying that we have invented a symbol. Yeah, we have defined a symbol like this. And when we say that this set is not bounded above in R, but it is non-empty, then we say this symbol is the supremum in the extended real number system. It's just a notation, a convention, nothing more than that. As I said, it's a convention.
I got that. I'm asking that why is this convention necessary?
We will see. We will see. In ideal world, you would also like to say what is the supremum of an empty set. Yeah, we will
Yes,
see.
ma'am.
Sometime maybe I don't know. I think I'll take a couple of lectures. When we come to the concept of limit superior and limit inferior, this will come handy. Yeah, so hold on until then.
Okay, ma'am. Sure.
Yeah, hold on. Or if you're interested, you can sort of pick your favorite book in analysis and take up the topic of limit inferior and limit superior. Yeah, we will see that. This makes sense there. Yeah. Okay. So for the moment, I have not written it, but I'll just write this here that there is a similar comment for for a subset of non-empty subset of real numbers which is not bounded below. So I just write that if S subset of R is non-empty and not bounded below, sorry. And not bounded below in the set R, then the infimum of S is defined to be or is said to be in the extended real number system. Okay. All right. Is that okay? Yeah. So as one of your friend asked, why is this concept useful in general? There are concepts like limit inferior, limit superior. We will see, and many more things to name where it comes useful to sort of consider sets which are not bounded above and talk about their supremum and infimum and things like that. Yeah, we will sort of come back to it, but just good to have. I thought this is a good opportunity to introduce this. All right. Any other questions? Okay, so I believe there are no further questions on this topic. All right, so let's move on to the next string of ideas. Okay, so the next concept that I want to talk about is that of metric spaces. Yeah, let's see. So at this point, let me make this point clear. So I'm making a deviation from the sequence of Bartley and Shepard's book. So we sort of did so we started off with the appendix A. Then I requested all of you to read chapter 1 on your own, which I believe that you would have done. Then we have seen the contents of chapter 2, except for the last section of intervals. So I will sort of assign some topics in that last section, for all of you to do, to read yourself. And the next thing that I would like to take up is chapter 11. Yeah. So we go to chapter 11 first and then come back to chapter 3. Chapter 11, glimpse of topology. We will take this up first and then come back to sequence and series, which is chapter 3. All right. So if you want, and some of you may not have this book, I can also post some sort of curated material from this book on Moodle, if that helps. Everybody present here has a copy of this book? Well, it's not really required, but if you're interested, then.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So let's see. So chapter 1, and the first thing that I want to say is a metric. Yeah. So this is the definition. So what is a metric? Let's see. Yeah. So just like, you have the real line and you give me 2 points on the real line, and I can tell you what is the distance between these 2 points. Yeah, you measure, so call these points x and y. You say x minus y, and there's some noise coming. You say x minus y, and yeah, sorry. So given 2 points on the real line, you can tell me what is the distance between these 2 points, right? That's the concept of absolute value, which everybody is familiar with. Now, what is it I want to do next? I want to talk about the following concept. You give me any arbitrary set, yes? Any arbitrary set, and you give me 2 elements of that set, and I want to talk about the distance between these 2 elements. Yeah, so this is what a metric does. So let me sort of make this definition first, and then I will sort of try to emphasize where are we heading. So a metric, or so this is also called as distance function. So on a set S is a function. So what is this function? So I'm going to denote this by D. Where is this defined? This is defined on the product S cross S. And this function is real valued. And so a metric to start off with is a function defined on the set, the product set S cross S, taking values in the set of real numbers, and that satisfies the following properties. Yeah. So the first thing I say is, you pick any 2 elements x and y in this set. This output, x and y are elements in set. So d of xy is a real number. Yeah. This I demand is always positive, no matter what element you pick in the set S. That's the first property. The second one I demand is, the distance between x and y is 0 if the distance between x and y is 0, this should imply that x is same as the point y. And if x is same as the point y, then the distance between the two should be the same. Yeah, this is an if and only if statement. That is second. The third is, the distance between x and y is same as the distance between y and x, and this is true for all elements in this set S. That's the third property. And the fourth one is, for any 3 elements, which I'm going to denote by x, y, and z in S, the distance between x and y is less than equal to the distance between x and z, distance between, sorry. So, okay, so let's go back. What am I saying? I want a notion to define the notion of distance. I want a concept to define how to measure distances between any 2 elements of an arbitrary set. Yeah, here is one way to do about it. We say that, let's consider, I demand that there be a function g. Where is it defined? On the product space S cross X, real value, satisfying the following thing. Yeah, for any 2 elements x and y in S, d of xy is always a positive real number. D of xy is 0 if and only if x equals y. d of xy equals d of yx, and this is true for all pairs of elements x and y in S. And if you have any 3 points x, y, z in S, the distance between x and y cannot be any bigger than the distance between x to z plus the distance between z and y. Yeah, so the last one here has a name. It's called as the triangle inequality. Right. So all it is saying is, so if you have 3 points x, y, and z, so let me draw some. This is just notation x, y, and z. So whether you go from, if you choose to go from x to z first and then go from z to y, the distance that you traverse has to be at least as big as the distance when you go from x to y directly. Yeah, that's what the fourth property is saying. Okay. Now, what am I trying to do? What is happening? Yeah, so let's see one example, and then we go back to the definition again if things do not sound very nice. So let's see the example. Yeah. Okay. So before I go to the example, let me just say, so anytime you can find a set S and a function D satisfying 1, 2, and 3, 4, then SD, this pair, is said to be a metric space. Yeah, so what does a metric space consist of? A metric space consists of a set and a function D satisfying 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yeah, so let's me start with a very simple example of a metric space. I am going to consider the set R of real numbers, and I'm going to make it as a metric space. Yeah. So I'm going to say I need to give you a function defined on the product space, taking values in R satisfying 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right. So I'm going to make this definition. I'm going to assign it as the absolute value of x minus y for all x and y in R. So please note that in this example, D I have defined to be the absolute value of x minus y. And this function D indeed satisfies 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yes. So with this, RD becomes a metric. So D defines a metric on R, and this RD becomes a metric space. This is called as, so this has a nomenclature. D is called the Euclidean metric. Yeah, so this is the very sort of this notion of measuring distances is what you have been doing all your life. Yeah, so I just sort of given you a very basic example. Okay, any questions so far? Is this okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, with everybody present here. See, this may look daunting at the first moment, but it's sort of very nice once you understand it. Yeah. So let's see one more example. Yeah. Okay. See one more example. Here is my cursor. Yeah. So it's possible to define several metrics on the same set. Yeah. So let's consider the set R2. Yeah. So what is R2? This is the set of ordered tuples R cross R. Yeah. The two-dimensional Euclidean space. Yeah. So I'm going to define metrics on this R2. Yeah. So on R2, consider. So if I have to define a metric on this space, I need to define, so let me call it D1. So this should be from R2 cross R2 to R, correct? By definition, a metric is a function defined like this, satisfying 1, 2, and 3, 4 listed in the above slide, right? Is that correct? Yes. Yeah, so I'm going to Any point of time if you feel lost. So I'm going to denote an element in here by x1, y1, another element by x2, y2. Yeah, and I'm going to say that. So let's define it to be something that you are already familiar with. So I'm going to consider the difference between x1 and x2, square it. Consider the difference between y1 and y2, square it, and take the square root of all of this, right? So this is for all. So this is this, or a tuple x1, y1, x2, y2 in the two-dimensional Euclidean space. Is that okay? Yes. Does the definition make sense to everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yes. So this is one. Here is another thing, D2. Yeah. So I'm going to define another metric on this. So x2, y2. I'm going to. So these are all definitions. Yeah. So I'm going to define it as supremum of. I'm going to measure the distance between x1 and x2 and y1 and y2 and take the supremum. Yes. So this is another function D2 defined on the product space R2 times R2 and taking values in R, right?
Ma'am, is it supremum or maximum?
See, supremum and maximum, there is certain linkage between them. When are the two same? When the supremum is realized, then it's the maximum. So in this case, it's the maximum. You know, you're just taking two numbers. So one of them is, yeah, so it's the same thing over here. Doesn't matter. Okay. So supremum is a little more general concept. Yeah. Okay. So another one, so x1, y1, x2, y2 is, so what do I do now? So I'm going to take the distance between x1 and x2 and sum it up with the distance between y1 and y2. Yeah. So all I'm trying to say is, by giving this example, that it is possible to define several metrics on the same set. Yeah. So we have not checked it. I will sort of leave it as an exercise. Let me write it as an exercise here. So something that you must do for your own sake. Exercise. Check that each of these is indeed a metric on the Euclidean 2 space. R2D1, R2D2, and R2D3 are metric spaces. Yeah. So what does it mean to say that they are metric spaces? All you are required to show is that D1, D2, D3 satisfy the 1, 2, 3, and 4 written here. Yes. Okay. So is this okay? Any questions so far? Okay, so I assume there are no questions. Let's go ahead. Now you might wonder and ask, you know, on the set of, on the real line and on the Euclidean 2 space, you already have a notion of distance, right? So this D is something that you have been doing forever, and so is D1. Yeah, you're familiar with this D1. Why go to metric space and, you know, bother about all these unnecessary things? So here is an answer to your question. Let's look at example 3. Yeah, so I'm going to look at example 3. Okay, so my set S in this case is C01. Yeah, What is C01? So let me just put a C01. Yeah. So what is this? So this is the set of functions. Yeah, f is a function defined on closed interval 0, 1, taking values in R such that f is continuous on closed interval 0, 1. Yeah, so don't bother, I have not defined what it is meant to what does it mean to say that a function is continuous. All I'm trying to is sort of give you an example in an abstract setting so as to make sense out of why are we actually bothered about metric spaces. All I'm trying to say is the concept of metric spaces allows us to measure distances in abstract sets, something which are not Euclidean, which are different from Rn. Yeah. So here is one example. So on this set, so S is my set, and I say that I am going to define a metric on this set. I am going to say, let me pick two elements F and G on this set S. Yeah. So F and G are functions now. Yeah. And I am going to say, what is the distance between F and G? Yes, in S. So is this making sense to all of you? Please say yes or no.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, is
Yes,
this
ma'am.
okay? Is everybody with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Yes,
even
ma'am.
if
Yes,
one
ma'am.
student is lost,
Yes, ma'am.
please let me know. Yeah, how many of you are there? Yeah, 36. Even if one student is lost, please let me know. Yeah, okay. So what am I trying to do? I am considering an abstract example, a set of all continuous functions on closed interval 0, 1, and I am going to say, how do you measure distances between two elements of this set? Here is one way to go about it. Yeah. So what I will do is, so let me pick an element F and let me pick another element G, and I need to tell you what is the distance between F and G. There are many ways to go about it. What am I going to do is, so each F is a function here. Yeah, so I'm going to say, let's consider f of x. So for x in the interval 0, 1, there's some noise coming. So for x in the interval, sorry, what is happening? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so let's get back here. So what am I trying to say? Pick any two elements f and g in this set S, and I'm going to tell you what is the distance between f and g. Yeah, so I'm going to consider fx minus gx. What is x? X is any arbitrary element in the interval 0, 1. F of x, the output is a real number. So is g of x. So I can take the absolute value of this, right? Now on the left hand side, I need to sort of compute something which is independent of x. Yeah. So one way to do about it is I take the supremum of that as x runs throughout the interval 0, 1. Yes? Yeah. Again, something for you to check that this is indeed a metric space. C01 D is a metric space. Check. See, for the most part of this course, we will work with only the real numbers in the Euclidean setting, but it is in your benefit to sort of get acquainted with the concept of metric spaces so that you have some idea of what is the world like outside. Yeah. Yeah. So is this okay?
Ma'am, why did we take the supremum?
see, if we don't take the supremum here, you know, you have this absolute value of fx minus gx. Yeah. So you compute this for each x. Now the output depends on x, right? And I want the, you know, on the left hand side, I don't want a dependence on x, right? As x varies, the output varies. So one way to get rid of that is to take the supremum.
Okay, ma'am. Got it.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. You know, and also I need to make sure that 1, 2, and 3 and 4 are satisfied. You know, for example, I want this. I want this, you know, I want property 2 to hold, right? So if the distance between f and g is 0, that should imply f equals g, right? So if you go back here and say that the distance between f and g is 0, if you sort of don't have the supremum here, what do you make sense out of it? You know, what does it mean to say fx equal to gx for some x? That doesn't say that the functions f and g are identical. All you want to say that the distance between f and g is 0 if and only if f equals the function g, which means that fx is equal to gx for every value of x. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, is that okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So, you know, the point, you know, I don't want you to sort of go into continuous functions and things like that. The only point of citing this example here is to give you an example of an abstract set for which you don't have, you might not have seen how to measure distances in this set. Yeah, that's all. Yeah, is this okay with everybody present here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll just leave this checking part to you. So do you think you can sort of take it up on your own? No, it's very simple. All you have to do is pick up a pen and write, as I said. Is that okay? Can I leave it for you to check? So this is 4.
Yes,
Can I
ma'am.
leave it for you to check? Okay. So there's only one student saying yes. Okay, let's see. All right. Okay, so there's one more example that I would like to sort of take it up. So there's one more example. So let S be an infinite set. Any arbitrary infinite set, something which is not finite. Okay. So for elements P and Q in this set, I am going to consider the following thing. Yeah, I am going to define the distance between P and Q to be, I'm going to say this is going to be 1 if P is different from Q, and this is going to be 0 if P is equal to Q. Yeah. See, the definition of the metric space demands that if P equals 0, then the distance better be 0. Yeah, there's no choice here. Over here, if P is different from Q, I am demanding that the distance between P and Q is 1. You know, this again is a metric space. ST is a metric space. Something which is very, very unlikely. So maybe I'll make this name D0, yeah, just for emphasis. So this is something for you to check. Again, another exercise. Yeah, this has a name, D0. So anytime you endow a set with a metric D0 defined as this, it is called as D0 is called as the discrete metric, and the set is called as the discrete metric space. D0 is called the discrete metric. We will come to it as to why does it make this name make sense a little later, called the discrete metric. Okay, so let's check whether 1, 2, and 3, and 4, the properties of in the definition of metric space are satisfies for this definition. Let's see, what is the first one? Let me see. The first one is that the distance between any two points is positive. That is true, right? So let me check that. Check. Is this okay? Is everybody with me, or are you feeling lost here?
No, ma'am, it's okay.
It's okay with everybody present here?
Yes, ma'am.
See, I need to take all of you in one single boat across the shore. Yeah, we want to sail through. Yeah, so is this okay? You know, any point you are lost, please let me know. You know, I don't get to see your faces. I have no idea what is happening. So, you know, you need to sort of either write in chat, or, you know, the best is if this is working fine, why don't you sort of speak up if there's a problem? So, do you want me to take up this proof of the statement as to why is D0, why does D0 define a metric on the set S? Or do you think you will be able to do it on your own?
Ma'am, it's simple. You can.
It's simple.
I
It's
can do
simple
it.
for everybody. I'll be very glad. Is that a yes with everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent. All right. Very nice. Okay. All right. So something, you know, I would like you to sort of make note of is that, for example, on the real line, the set of real numbers, instead of the usual Euclidean metric, you can consider the discrete metric. So this is the real line with the discrete metric. Yeah. I'll just write it here for emphasis. So this is the real line with the discrete metric. Sorry. Right. So you have sort of another example of a metric defined on the same set. Okay. So in order to sort of use these metric spaces effectively, let's sort of see a couple of more definitions. Okay. Let's see. All right. Let's see. So the first definition is the following thing. So definition. All right. So I'm going to say let XT be a metric space. Yeah. What does it mean is X is a set, D is a metric on the set X, satisfying 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yeah. So the what is that I want to define? Then for epsilon positive, the epsilon neighborhood. So I'm going to define what is the meaning of the statement. The epsilon neighborhood of a point P in X is the set. Which set is this? I'm going to collect all elements in X for which the distance from P is at most epsilon. Yeah. So let's see. Let's consider. So let's see an example. Yeah. Let's see an example. We'll go back to the definition, but let's see an example. Let's consider R, the set of real numbers with the Euclidean metric. Yeah. So D is defined as follows. So this is right. This is the way we define the Euclidean metric on R. Right. So let me fix a point. So let me fix P to be. So let's consider a point P naught in R, some point real on the real line. Yeah. Yeah. And if I ask you what is the epsilon neighborhood of a point P naught in this metric space, what will that be? Then the epsilon neighborhood of this point P naught is given by definition. So what is this? It's given by all points in this set which are at a distance at most epsilon from the point P naught. Correct? Is that okay? Now over here in this example, what is this distance between P naught and X? It's just the Euclidean distance, the absolute value of P naught minus X, right? So this is saying that this set in this example is exactly the following thing. Correct? And what is this? Is everybody with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, and what is this? This is exactly the interval P naught minus epsilon, P naught plus epsilon, right? So on the real line, you jot down this point P naught. Somewhere it is P naught plus epsilon and somewhere it is P naught minus epsilon, right? And so an epsilon neighborhood of a point P naught on the real line in the Euclidean metric is an interval around P naught like this. Is this okay? Is
Yes,
that a
ma'am.
yes with everybody? Yeah. Now question, something for you to work out. Exercise. Now I sort of consider the same set and now I endow it with the discrete metric. D naught is the discrete metric. The exercise is please work out epsilon neighborhoods of, yeah, so I'll just write down what are the epsilon neighborhoods of point P naught in R in the discrete metric.
Madam, can you please repeat the previous example?
I will go back to it. Let me write this and then I'll go back to it. Okay. So let's see. Yeah. So I defined a new concept of given a metric space XD, the epsilon, you fix epsilon to be positive. You define the epsilon neighborhood of a point P in X as the following set. You consider all elements in the set X which are at a distance at most epsilon from the given point P. Yeah. So when I am considering the Euclidean metric on the set of real numbers, my distance d is given as the absolute value of x minus y. Now I am here trying to work out the epsilon neighborhood of a point P naught, right? So I'm saying here, so by definition, this is the following set. Yeah, so let's look at it. By definition, it is the set of all real numbers such that the distance between P naught and X is at most epsilon. Correct? Is this okay? Are you with me up till this point?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Now, what is the definition of this function in this example? The definition is this. Yeah. So I am going to apply that here. So this is exactly the set. The absolute value of P naught minus X is less than epsilon. Now, what is this? The absolute value of P naught minus X is, by definition, this is P naught minus X is less than epsilon and minus of P naught plus X is less than epsilon. Is the problem here in this last equality?
Rahul, ma'am,
Yes. Yes.
some Noise from behind. I think
There is a noise, but I was wondering if this noise is coming from the end of the
Rahul,
student who has asked this question. So that is the reason I don't want to mute it. So that's the reason I don't want to mute it. Yeah, Rahul, can you hear us? Rahul?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So Rahul,
Yes, ma'am.
yeah. So does that answer your question? So are you lost in this equality here?
Yes, ma'am. Got it.
You got it or you did not understand?
And
Yeah, you understood it? Excellent. Yeah. So in order to get rid of this noise, I'm going to mute everybody for now. All right. Let's go back to our slides. Okay. So if this little example is okay with everybody, all I want you to do is work with the same set, but now a different metric, this time the discrete metric, and tell me what are epsilon neighborhoods. Okay. So you know the metric, the neighborhoods depend on the metric D. Yeah. So if you consider the set X with another metric, then the neighborhoods will change, right? So the neighborhoods depend on the function, you know, the metric D and also the epsilon. Correct? Is that okay? Everybody follows this bit?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Any questions so far? Any further questions? Okay, so if there are none, I would like to sort of take up one more definition and then see, hopefully see a lot of examples. Yeah, okay, let's see. So what did I do? I just defined neighborhoods.
Ma'am,
Yeah, tell me.
before you start, I have a doubt.
Tell me.
Ma'am, can I define a metric space between two elements that belong to different spaces? For example, if I take one element that belongs to R3 and another
Yeah.
element between R2, can I do
No,
that?
no. Metric space is doesn't, yeah. It just measures distance between two elements of the same set. It's a distance function. See,
Okay.
when you measure distance, right, you don't pick one element of the real line and other element on R2 and then measure, you know, you don't ask what is the difference between the 0.1 here and, you know, the 0.11 in R2. That doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense, right? You are measuring distance between two elements in the same set. Yes?
Okay. Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so this is a distance function. Okay. All right. Another definition. What is it? So again, you know, we will say, I will not maybe write it again and again, but we are now working in metric spaces. So let XD be a metric space. Right? So X is a set, D is a metric on the set X. A point P of X is said to be, so this is defined to be a limit point of a set S. Where is S coming from? S is a subset of X, right? If the following is true, if every neighborhood, yeah, let me finish this definition and we will see. If every neighborhood of P contains a point Q different from P and belonging to S. Yeah, what is it saying? So given a metric space X and S is a subset of X and P is a point of X, when do we say P is a limit point of this set X? Yeah? We say that if every neighborhood of P contains a point of S different from P. Yeah. So, you know, we will sort of go back to this definition. I think it's best that we take up an example and then come back to this definition again. Yeah, let's see this example. So I am going to consider the real line with the Euclidean metric. Yeah, so D is defined like follow. Yeah, this is the usual Euclidean metric that I am considering on the set R of real numbers. Right? And I am going to take S as the interval. So let me take it not AB, let me take it very concrete. Let me take it as the interval 0, 1. Yeah, so everybody with me on this example, I'm going to consider this subset of the real line. And let's see. let's try to draw. Yeah, so let's take this and let's take this. Let's take a point here. Let's consider this point half on the real line. I say that the first claim is half is a limit point of the set S. Why is it? So let's see. Yeah, let's go back to this definition. What does it say? I am going to say half, which belongs to the set of real numbers, a real number half, will be a limit point of this open interval 0, 1 if every neighborhood of half contains a point Q of the interval 0, 1 different from half. Is that okay? Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Now let's go back to the previous example, and we had worked out, you know, for the Euclidean metric, what are neighborhoods of a point? The neighborhoods of a point, the epsilon neighborhoods, are given as open intervals around that point of the form P naught minus epsilon, P naught plus epsilon. So over here in this example, the point P naught is half, right? Is that okay? So I'll write this down. Recall that
Yes, ma'am.
epsilon neighborhoods of the point half belongs to R are given by, this is what we worked out in the previous example, are given by half minus epsilon, half plus epsilon. Right? Is that okay? Is that okay with everybody? I'm just recalling from previous example, right? Now, what am I saying? If half is to be a limit point of this set S in this example, then every neighborhood of half must contain a point of the interval 0, 1 different from half. Yeah? So every neighborhood of the point half, which looks like an interval like this, certainly contains points of the open interval 0, 1 different from half, isn't it? Is that a yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? Evidently. I'll just write it down because I think many of you are seeing this concept for the first time. Is that the case, or you have seen this before? So this intersect half, not only this is non-empty, this intersect all I want to say is this intersect minus this singleton half, this is non-empty. This is what I want to say. Yeah, this is what is important here, right? And hence, conclusion, half is a limit point of the set open interval 0, 1 in the Euclidean metric. Is that correct? Is everybody with me? This is rather shabbily written. I'll just erase this.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, everybody with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
excellent.
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent, very nice. Okay, what if I pick any other point of this interval instead of half? What if I pick any other point of the interval? Any other point of this interval?
And each point is a limit point.
In this example, every point of this interval is a limit point, correct? Does everybody see this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so it's exactly the same proof. I'll write it as an exercise. Let P be any point of E, then P is a limit point of E. Yeah, please check that. Can I leave you to check this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to the next example. This was example 1 over here. Example 2. Let me sort of stick to the Euclidean metric before we take up other metrics. Let's just see some more examples in this metric space only, because I think this is a new concept. Yeah. So that's the first example. The second example, let's consider the same set. So I am on the Euclidean metric, the set of real numbers with the Euclidean metric. I am considering the set S, and I say that all we know is so far is having done. So assuming that you have done this little exercise that I mentioned above, that so there's no E here. Sorry, what am I saying? There's no E here. This is all S. Sorry. There's no E. There's only S. Yeah. That every point of this open interval 0, 1 is a limit point of the interval 0, 1. Yeah. So I'm assuming this is done. Every point of open interval 0, 1 is a limit point of open interval 0, 1. Correct? What about the point 0? Yeah, the question is 0 a limit point of the set S?
Yes, ma'am. 0 and 1 both.
Yeah, let's see. Is 0, thank you so much, a limit point of S? Yeah. So the answer is yes. And why is that? So let's go back to the definition. If 0 is to be a limit point of the interval 0, 1, every neighborhood of 0 must contain a point of the interval 0, 1 different from 0. Yeah. Now again, what do neighborhoods of 0 look like? Neighborhoods of 0 will look like 0 minus epsilon, 0 plus epsilon. Correct? Yeah.
Yes.
So let's make this remark. For any epsilon positive, any epsilon neighborhood of 0 will look like minus epsilon plus epsilon, an open interval around 0. This certainly contains, in fact, it contains infinitely many points, of the open interval 0, 1 different from 0, correct? In fact, 0 is not a point of the open interval 0, 1. So by the definition above, conclusion, as all of you were pointing out, 0 is a limit point of S. Is that okay? Everybody with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Another question. So this is something I leave it for you to check. Is 1 a limit point of the set S with the Euclidean metric? Yes, something for you to check at home. Yeah, so I have been rather shabby here. Is the point 1? Yeah, so please try this. Let me sort of take up, if this example is okay, there is one more example that I would like to talk about. So let me stick to the Euclidean metric and let me change my set. Let me consider this set. So my set is open interval 0, 1 union the point 3. So my set is this, 0 is here, 1 is here, and let's say 3 is somewhere here. Yeah, so this is my set. Okay. Yeah, so exactly as in the above example, one should be able to say that every point of the open interval 0, 1 is a limit point of the set S. 0 is also a limit point of the set S. In example 3, 1 is also a limit point of the set S. Let's see, what about 3? Is 3 a limit point of S?
No, ma'am.
Yeah, so the claim is that, thank you so much, that 3 is not a limit point. Sorry, what am I doing? 3 is not a limit point of S. You know, go back to your definition of negation. If you have to show that 3 is not a limit point of S, what is that you have to show? You have to find me one single neighborhood of 3 which contains no other point of S different from 3. Correct? So can you give me a neighborhood of 3 which does not contain any other point of S different from 3?
Yeah, for 1 by 3, it will work.
Sorry, which one? Say that again,
Epsilon
please.
equal to 1 by 3.
Epsilon. So
Epsilon equal to 1 by 3.
1 by 3. The suggestion is that take epsilon equal to 1 by 3, then the neighborhood 3 minus 1 by 3, 3 plus 1 by 3 is a neighborhood of 3, which, so this is a neighborhood of 3 such that so if you intersect this neighborhood with the set S, all you get is this point itself only and nothing else. So here I have been able to find a neighborhood of the point 3 which contains no other point of the set S besides the point 3 itself. Conclusion, 3 is not a limit point of the set S in this example.
Ma'am?
Is a no. Yeah, tell me.
Ma'am, is this intersection resulting 3?
Is this intersection, sorry?
The intersection that you have written, is this intersection resulting to 3?
What else do you have in this set? Isn't it? Just this set. Yeah, what else do you have? See, S is this set, 0, 1, open interval 0, 1, union the point singleton 3. So if you intersect it here, what else do you get?
Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm just,
am I
I just
wrong?
get confused with something. That's
Yeah, is that okay? See, S
Yeah,
is this set, yeah, in this example, right? So here we have been able to demonstrate a neighborhood of 3, which such that it intersects the set S only in the point 3 and nothing else. But that's not what the definition of the limit point says. Yeah, so over here, where is the definition? The definition of the limit point says that every neighborhood of 3, if 3 were to be a limit point, then every neighborhood of 3 must contain a point of S different from 3. Correct? Is this okay?
yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
everybody present here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. Excellent. If that is
Yes,
the
ma'am. Yes,
case,
ma'am.
then I'll excellent. I'd like to give you an exercise, something for you
Ma'am, I
to.
have a question.
Yeah, tell me.
Ma'am, is it just okay that if any point is means the intersection has at least one point? It is not necessary that the entire neighborhood has to lie in S.
No. See, let's go back. So your question is specific to example 3. See. Let's see.
Not
Let's
exactly, ma'am.
Yeah, let me see. Yeah, let's go back to the definition of the limit points, right? So there are several things that I want to highlight here, but let's see. Just to answer your question, let's see if I've understood your question correctly. So XD is a metric space, S is a subset of X. We say P is a limit point of S if every neighborhood of P contains a point of S different from P. Yeah. So every neighborhood of S must contain one point which is different from P. Right? So in this example, the claim is that 1/3 is not a limit point because here there is a neighborhood of 1/3. Sorry, what am I saying? In this example, 3 is not a limit point because in this example, here is a neighborhood of 3 which does not contain any other point of S besides the point 3 itself. Yeah, so this is saying that P is not a limit point. If you have to show that P is a limit point, for example, in this example, so if you have to show that 1/2 is a limit point, then what you have to show? You have to show that for every neighborhood of 1/2 contain a point of the interval 0, 1 different from 1/2. You have to just get hold of one point different from that potential point. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah. Anything else?
I didn't get that part as to why did we take epsilon as 1/3 only.
Okay, I'll come back to it. See, if so, there are various choices for epsilon, right? Let me see a different thing. So what if I take epsilon to be, let's say, let me sort of postpone this exercise here. Let's just. Sorry, let me first fix this. So let's take something else. Yeah, let's take epsilon to be 1.5, or let's take it to be 2.5. Let's take epsilon. I'll write it as epsilon naught to be 2.5. Yeah, this is a positive number. Then an epsilon neighborhood of 3 looks like 3 minus 2.5, 3 plus 2.5. Right? What is this interval? This is 1/2, and what is this? 5.5. Yeah, is that correct? Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So let's draw. Yeah. So in this picture, let me try to draw this in green. So an interval half to 0.55 will look like this. Yeah, half is somewhere here, and 5.5 is something here. Yeah, I don't care. Yeah. So it is something like this. Yeah. So what I've drawn in green is the interval half to 5.5. Correct. Now for this epsilon, so for this epsilon naught neighborhood around 3, what can you say? Yeah, so What can you say? If you consider this epsilon naught neighborhood around the point 3 and take intersection with the set S, what do you get? What do you get? What do you get?
Half to 1.
Open interval half to 1 and 3.
Yeah, so you get open interval half to 1 union the point 3. Correct? Yes? Is that okay? So for this particular epsilon naught interval around 3, if you intersect with S, this neighborhood of S intersects with S certainly in something which is different from 3. This does not say anything about 3 being a limit point or 3 not being a limit point. See, if you look at these two examples, so you look at this example and this example. For one choice of epsilon, you got a neighborhood of 3 which does not intersect in S in anything else besides the singleton 3. And if you take epsilon naught neighborhood 2.5 around 3, then this intersects S in points other than the singleton 3. Right? Now, if you have to show that, let's go back to the definition. If you have to show that 3 is a limit point of S, then every neighborhood of 3 must contain a point of S different from 3. Is that correct? Now, choice epsilon equal to 1 by 3 shows that there is indeed one neighborhood which does not do this job. Now, if you check epsilon not equal to 2.5, that doesn't show anything. Yeah. In fact, what I'm trying to say is epsilon equal to 1 by 3 is not unique. What else can work? What else can work? Any epsilon, which is what will work here? Less than 2 will do the job. Is that okay? Do you see this?
Yes,
Why
ma'am.
am I saying this? Because the
Yes,
distance
ma'am.
between 3 and the point 1 is 2 units. All I want to do is find out, isolate one neighborhood of 3 which does not intersect with S in anything else besides the point 3 itself. So 1 by 3 is not a unique choice. Any epsilon which is strictly less than 2 will do the job here. Do you understand this point? See, this is very, very important.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, is that okay? So I don't remember, don't see the name of the student who had asked this question. So who was that student?
Arijit.
Arijit. Yeah. So Arijit, did you get an answer to your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Anything strictly less than 2 will actually work. But if you pick something which is bigger than 2, then you run into trouble, as this example of 2.5 shows. Yes. Is that yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So, I think my time is already up, but I will just sort of highlight it here that the limit point P, in this example, P is a point in X. P may or may not belong to S. For example, when we say that, in this example too, we show that 0 is a limit point of S, but 0 does not belong to S. So a limit point may or may not belong to S. Yeah, something to be kept in mind. Yeah, I think I'll just stop right here. Thank you all for your time and attention. Continue working and remember your assignment is due this Saturday. Yeah, I'll sort of stop this recording now and